All right, the next topic is bank reconciliation statement. So, what are bank reconciliation statements? In order to understand that, we have to consider a scenario, and then we'll be able to understand what bank reconciliation statements are. Okay, the business, it involves in cash dealings with other businesses. That's something quite easy to understand. Majority of those cash dealings, they get settled through check or banking system. Okay, no problem so far. What happens is that in our books we are maintaining a separate T account for bank, or we are maintaining a cash book with a bank column, right? And in this cash book we would be recording all the transactions of the receipts and payments that we have made through the banking system. At the end of the period, we would have a certain carried down or closing balance, right? This would be the closing balance that we have with the bank, and this is the amount that should ideally be there in our bank account. What happens is that in order to test whether this is the amount, or otherwise as well for the control purposes of the business, there is something called bank statement which we get from the bank. So cash book, it is prepared by business itself. We do the accounting, it's our books of account, we are doing the accounting and recording and everything. So these are our books. Bank statement is prepared by bank, right? So the bank says that this is your bank account with me, and in your bank account these are the amounts that have been received and which have been paid through your bank account prepared by bank. Achha, if I have an asset, so asset would have carried down balance on the credit side. This means that this is an asset. So if I have an asset in the form of bank account, the bank would have the liability first of all. So my asset, the money that I've deposited with the bank, it would be the liability for the bank. That we agree on, right? So all the receipts for bank, they would be credit transactions, and all the payments in my books, they would be debit transactions in the bank account. Okay, so there would be an opening balance. The same way I would have a brought down opening balance in my cash book, there would be receipts, there would be payments, and at the end there would be a closing balance. Now the thing is that quite often this closing balance in the banking statement, it does not match with the carried down balance that I have in my books. Okay, so there are a few reasons that this balance it mismatches. It could be that there have been certain transactions in the bank which I have not recorded. That is reason number one. So there are transactions recorded in bank statement not recorded by business. Okay, so but natural, the reaction to this should be that I should update my cash book. So as a to in order to incorporate these transactions in my book, I would have an adjusted cash book or updated cash book. So I would enter these transactions in my cash book, which would give rise to adjusted or updated cash book. There is another thing, which are the transactions which have been recorded by me, transactions recorded in cash book but not appearing in bank statement. Recorded in cash book, not appearing in bank statement. Achha ji, for these, what we will do, first of all, we'll check if these transactions they have been recorded erroneously. If they represent an error, then we would reverse those transactions or correct those transactions. That's the first thing. other than that, there would still be some transactions which are not erroneous, which have been recorded correctly in my book, and they're not being reflected in the bank statement. So we can do nothing. We can't force bank to record these transactions. You'd ask why. Achha, let's look at examples of what are the transactions that would appear in bank statement and which would not have been recorded by the business. So for example, if I have a standing order, the bank has a standing order that, for example, I've got a monthly subscription of something, of some magazine, and I tell them that each date, each 5th October, each 5th of every month, pay them this much amount, subscription amount. So bank would automatically deduct that. And it could be that personally I forget to record that, so it appears in the bank statement, it wouldn't be appearing in my book. I would record that amount in my, I would record that payment. That is an example of payment which happens without my knowledge, or let's say which I miss, which would appear in the bank statement but which wouldn't have been recorded by me. Achha, on the receipt end, it could happen that some of my debtors, or one of my debtors, he pays directly into my bank account without informing me. So that way, I would have received some amount which I did not have any knowledge of, hence I did not record it until I got the bank statement. So once I get the bank statement, I would update my cash book for that. Okay, so here was an example of a payment and a receipt which is there in the bank statement and not in my books. And in both cases, yes, my books, they need to be adjusted. So I'll adjust those. Achha, what about the transactions which would appear in the cash book and not in the bank statement? Achha, first of all, these would be transactions. Let's say if I am your creditor, you bought something from me. Okay, you bought goods from me, and then you paid me through check. Once you pay me through check, in your cash book, you would record a credit transaction, payment to Saad, right? You'd credit the cash book, you'd debit the Saad's account, and that would show that this amount, it has been paid from your bank. But what I do is, I just take that check and put it in my drawer. And I, being a lazy person, I say that I'll just collect all these checks for a while, and a month or two later, I'll deposit them all together in the bank account. So until I actually withdraw that amount which you have paid me, your bank wouldn't show a debit transaction. Your bank wouldn't show that this amount has been withdrawn from your bank account, right? It's still lying in your bank account. Okay, but from your cash book, you have to eliminate it since you have made the payment to the relevant person. Acha, an example of receipt could be that I paid you by check. You deposited that check in the bank account, but let's say your bank account is of Mizan Bank, my bank account is of UBL. So I gave you a check of UBL, you deposited that check of UBL in your Mizan bank account, and I told you clearing it takes a few days. So you deposited this check on the last date, and as soon as you deposited it in your bank account, you made the entry in cash book, check debit, Saad's account credit, right? So you have recorded this increase in your bank account, yet bank wouldn't show this increase in your bank account until that check it gets cleared, and the clearing, it can take time. So again, this amount, it wouldn't appear as having been received in your bank account, but you would have recorded it. So for such transactions which are recorded in cash book but are not there in bank statements, other than errors, for these transactions, we prepare a statement which we call bank reconciliation statement. Bank reconciliation statement. Acha ji, one thing to note, that bank reconciliation statement, these transactions, they are just a timing difference. Okay. So for example, if you have paid me with check and I haven't withdrawn that amount yet, it's only a matter of time until I actually withdraw that amount, right? So it may appear in 1 month's bank reconciliation, by next month it would have cleared. If it doesn't clear in 2 months, 3 months, then it rings bells that why is that amount constantly appearing in the bank reconciliation statement? Why is this thing not getting cleared? Similarly, if I've deposited something in the bank account in the normal course of business, it would have gotten into my bank account by the month end. But if I deposit something towards the end of the month, then it makes sense that due to month end, I have to close the books, and it might be that the bank statement on that particular date, it doesn't show that the amount it has been received. So a couple of days down the road, it would appear in my bank account. But it can't be that it gets reappeared, I mean it reappears as a reconciling item 2 months, 3 months. It doesn't make sense. So bank reconciliation, all the items which appear in the bank reconciliation statements, they are temporary timing differences. Bank reconciliation statement. Acha. Acha, another thing this tells us is that the first thing that we will that we would get to once we Achha, now let's write down the steps for the preparation of bank statements. So what we do once we receive the bank statement is that I have bank statement and I have cash book. Instead, let's write steps to prepare bank reconciliation statement. Steps of preparing bank reconciliation statement. अच्छा जी. Step number 1, we match the opening balances of bank account and cash book. So bank account opening balance, obviously it would appear in bank statement. So match opening balances of bank statement and cash book. At your level, I don't think they'll test for differences in opening balances. If there is an opening balance difference, it should have been explained in last month's reconciliation. If there is a difference in the opening balance of bank statement and cash book, it means there was a difference in last month's closing balance and cash book, right? And that would mean there would have been some bank reconciliation statement prepared last month to explain this difference, right? So for these, if there is a difference, ideally at your level, for the questions that you do, there wouldn't be differences. If there is, the answer is that it would have been explained in last month's bank reconciliation statement. Another thing to note, bank reconciliation statement would be prepared for each separate bank account. So if you have got one bank account in Mizan Bank, one bank account in ABL, one bank account in UBL, one bank account in National Bank of Pakistan, for all four bank reconciliations would be prepared. To the extent that if you have two bank accounts in Mizan, two bank accounts in ABL, even then there would be two separate bank reconciliation statements for two Mizan bank accounts and two separate for the other bank's accounts. Okay, so for each bank account there would be a separate bank reconciliation statement. That is something from the practical perspective. It would, again, this thing wouldn't be tested at your level. Just for your knowledge, it has to be prepared for separately for each bank account. Acha ji, assuming that opening balances they match, then what we would do is match and knock off transactions appearing in both bank statement and cash book. This step is also sometimes called knocking bank statement and cash book. So each debit transaction in the bank statement, it would appear as credit transaction in the bank statement, and each credit transaction in the cash book. Sorry, I think I said it wrong first. So each credit transaction in cash book, each credit transaction in cash book would appear as debit transaction in bank statement, and each debit transaction in cash book, it would appear as credit transaction in bank statement. Okay, so all the transactions, first of all, we'll knock off all the transactions that are there in both. So these transactions are fine. They're appearing in both the bank statement and cash book. They don't cause us any concern. We'll move on. Now the transactions that do not match. So there would be some that are appearing in the bank statement and not in the cash book. So for these four transactions appearing in bank statement, appearing in bank statement and not in cash book, record them in adjusted slash updated cash book. HG. And lastly, for transactions, so now all the transactions that are there in bank statement, they are reflected in your cash book, either this month or previous. So last, it could be that for this particular month some transactions they are not matching, yet you wouldn't record them because they were last month's reconciling item. So last month's reconciling item, it appears in this month, so that doesn't cause us concern because obviously it was recorded in last month, so we wouldn't re-record them. Again, this thing I don't think it would be tested at your level, but just to give you practical knowledge, it could be this thing as well. Acha ji. And lastly, now what remains is transactions which are appearing in cash book and they haven't appeared in any bank statement at all. So for transactions appearing in cash book and not in bank statement, bank statement. Acha ji, prepare bank reconciliation statement. Bank reconciliation statement. ठीक है जी. Any confusion or question this far? None. Good. अच्छा जी. अच्छा. Now there would be two formats of bank statement. They aren't really two formats. Let's see. One way to prepare bank reconciliation statement is obviously we'll have the heading bank reconciliation statement. We'll put the date and the month for which we're doing it, and we'll put the account number for which we are preparing this bank statement. Acha, at your level, you would be given the format in the, I mean, a rough structure in your exam. You'll just have to fill that out. If you have to prepare on your own, you know how to draw the whole thing. Acha ji. So the two ways to do it is, first is we write balance as per updated cash book. नहीं. So this was the cash book. After, so what we do is, once the month ends and once we see the difference between the closing balance of cash book and closing balance of bank statement, we redraw cash book. So over here for step 3, what we'll do is, I'll write down the heading. The format would be the same. I'll just say updated cash book, and over here I will write bank column only. Okay. And now in this updated cash book, I will have the brought down balance, which was actually the carried down balance of the previous cash book that I had. So this carried down balance would be brought down over here, and thereafter I will record the new transactions which were there in the bank statements and which I had missed to record. And now I will have another carried down balance, which would be the one that would appear in bank reconciliation statement. Does that answer your question? All right. अच्छा जी, noted this far? अच्छा जी, so I have this balance as per updated cash book recorded over here. Then the two types of reconciling items are unpresented checks and uncredited amounts. Uncredited amounts. And once I adjust these two, that should match with balance as per bank statement. Acha ji, instead of trying to memorize that whether I add or deduct the uncredited amount or the unpresented checks, the better way to do it is to understand. Give me just 1 second. Balance as per bank statement, that would be over here. These are the amounts, these are the amounts. Oh, should have been outside. अच्छा जी, इनको आगे मूव कर देते हैं, यहाँ आ जाएंगे over here, and this would be the sum. अच्छा, let's say that right now what I'm doing is I'm reconciling the balance of my cash book with the balance of bank statement, right? So what's happening for unpresented checks is that I am saying these checks, these amounts, they do not belong to me. I've already paid them. But the bank is saying no, they are yours. The bank statement says no, you haven't paid them, these amounts are yours. So just to reconcile with the bank, I'm not actually adding them in my cash book. I'm saying just if I add this, just if I've deducted these amounts from my cash book, just if I add this back, would it match my balance with the bank statement or not? So I would add unpresented checks when I'm going from cash book to bank statement, right? So the bank said, so for example, you paid me a check of $100. I haven't withdrawn it yet. You have deducted this amount from your bank statement. So as per your from your cash book. So you're saying your cash book balance is 0. The bank is saying no, your bank balance is 100. So you're saying just if I add this 100 amount, would that make my cash book balance match with the bank or not? So just for the sake of reconciliation, I am adding this balance. So these unpresented checks, they get added. Understood? Acha ji, as for the uncredited amounts, I am saying that these amounts are mine. The bank says they're not yours. I say I've deposited this money, the bank says they're not yours. So I am saying that this amount is mine. So my cash book says that my balance is $100, but the bank says no, your balance is 0. So just in order to reconcile with the bank, I will say, all right, if I deduct these uncredited amounts, would that make my balance match with the bank? So if that's the only difference between the two, so I less or I deduct the uncredited amounts. Okay. Acha ji, this is one format. The other format is exactly same but vertically upside down. So for the other one, let me write the changes that we'll make. Acha, in fact, let me put this in a box. Mr. Box, Mr. Box. ठीक है जी. Another Mr. Box, Mr. Box, Mr. Box, duplicate, Another mystery box. Let's give it a different color. Acha ji. For this one, what we'll do is we'll start with balance as per bank statement. Okay. So if we start with balance as per bank statement, after adjusting the reconciling amounts, which are the unpresented checks and the uncredited amounts, my balance, it should match with balance as per updated cash book. Updated cash book. Acha ji, what treatment should we have for unpresented checks and uncredited amounts? So the bank statement says for unpresented checks that this amount is yours, 100. I am saying my cash book is saying no, this amount is not mine, I've paid it. So just to match, just to reconcile with the cash book, I will have to less or deduct the unpresented checks. Okay. As for the uncredited amounts, the bank says they're not yours. The bank says your balance is zero. I say no, I've deposited this amount in my bank. So just to reconcile with the cash book, I will add these uncredited amounts. Okay. So this is the difference. Some students, they make the mistake of going for rata or memorizing that unpresented checks, they get added or they get subtracted. That's not the way to go about it. The better way is to understand that why do they get added when they get added and why to deduct them when we're deducting them. Okay. So if you're going from updated cash book to bank statement, we add the unpresented and less the uncredited amounts, and other way around for this. If we are going for bank statement to updated cash book. अच्छा this. अच्छा जी, now practice questions. चलें जी, let's start this one. So first I'll give heading adjusted cash book, the updated cash book. What's the term used over here? They use the term corrected cash book, या updated cash book. चलें कोई भी. So I write updated cash book and I'll write bank column only. Okay. I'm just drawing the format, otherwise I'll follow the pattern which we discussed, that first, I mean, we'll go step by step on that. So since later on we'd be needing a cash book, I'm just drawing the format out here. So there would be an updated cash book and there would be a bank reconciliation statement. Bank reconciliation statement. Acha ji, now the steps were, the step number 1, we have to match the opening balances of bank statement and cash book. Acha ji, balance brought forward for bank statement, it's 240, and then there is a check paid and it becomes 220. So the balance brought forward for this cash book is 220. First of all, there is a difference in the opening balances. Fine. 19. चलें जी, ठीक है. There is an opening difference, but after receiving a check, it becomes the same. So seemingly, this check was a reconciling item last month, but we'll see. We'll match it. Acha. Then what happens is we received a payment of 145 from L Christ, and on 14th, and on 14th I can see in the bank statement that there is a receipt of 145 from L Christ. Okay, then there is a receipt of 170 from M Mandy in cash book, and there is a receipt of 170 M Mandy in the bank statement as well. Then it says in bank statement there appears an amount 140 which is not there in the cash book. So amounts appearing in bank statement and not in cash book, they will go to updated cash book. Okay. Acha ji. And then there is a receipt of 275 in bank statement, and 275 it also appears over here. Acha ji. Now for the payments. Now for the payments, there is a payment of 210 in this month. 210 and check number 1977. So we receive check number 1977. Then I mean we pay, it appears in the bank statement as well. There is a payment of 150, check number 1978. Yes, it's there in the bank statement too. There is a payment of 190. There is a payment of 190 in the cash book which is not there in the bank statement, and there is a payment of 170 in the 170. This doesn't appear in the cash book, so we will again record these two transactions in updated cash book. Okay. Acha ji, this 10, this is also not there in updated cash book. We will update it, and this sort of verifies that this was some payment which was made last month and which perhaps it got cleared this month, or that person encashed the balance this month. So that brings the total to 220. Okay, and this 220 it matches with the opening balance of cash book. Okay, so for updated cash book we said that we will start from the actual closing balance of cash book that we have, which is 390. So I will say brought down or brought forward how much, 390. Now we will record the transactions that are there in bank statement but not in cash book. So there have been two payments. One is 170, and this is perhaps, it doesn't make sense. There is 170 over here, lodgements, and there is 170. So this check it bounced. This check it bounced, right? Initially, what's happening? एक second. ये check bounce हुआ, तो initially we recorded it when we received it as a receipt, but when it bounced we did not. So it means that this check we would reverse in the cash book. It would mean M Mandy would debit and bank it would credit with 170. So we have made the 170 receivable from M Mandy alive again. Acha ji, the next one is M Johnny credit transfer. So some debtor, he has made a direct direct transfer to a bank account which we couldn't record. So we'll now record it 140 and we will credit M Johnny's account. Okay. And the last one's bank charges. Obviously, bank charges is another thing that often appears as a reconciling item, and not a reconciling item, an item that's there in cash book but not in the item that's there in the bank statement but not in the cash book. So we will update our cash book with this. So 10, and this would be bank charges. Bank charges. Acha ji. So now the new balance that we have is 390 plus 140, 530. हाँ जी, what's the carried down balance? Hmm. 450 20 minus 70 3 350 350, is that what you're getting? ठीक है जी. Now let's prepare the bank reconciliation statement. For bank reconciliation statement, we will say balance as per updated cash book. Balance is that after each transaction, what's your closing balance? So initially you had a bank balance of 240. Then you made a payment of 20, or that person he withdrew their check of 20. So now your bank balance is 220. Then you made another payment of 210. Now your bank balance is just $10. Then you submit an amount of 145. You deposit an amount of 145. So that makes your bank balance 155. So that's your closing bank balance. So we know that we have to prepare. The trouble it begins because the closing bank balance and the closing cash balance, they did not match. That is why we have to prepare the bank. I mean, we have to match, we have to do the knocking, and we have to check whether all the transactions they have been recorded, and eventually if we need to prepare the bank reconciliation statement or not. So at the end of this month, you're saying that your bank balance was 390. The bank was saying that your bank balance is 410. And after making the adjustments from the bank statement, you said, no, my bank balance is 350. But the bank's adamant that it's 410. So let's see if we can match it, that whether the difference it can be explained or not. So now we say balance as per updated cash book. How much is it? 350. Then what do? We have unpresented checks. We add them, and there are uncredited amounts. We subtract them, and that should ideally match our balance with that of bank statement balance as per bank statement. ठीक है जी. How much is the balance as per bank statement? 410. अच्छा जी. Then unpresented checks. So these are the payments which I have made, and people, they have not seemingly withdrawn. This is this N Binger amount. This one. This is a payment I have made, but it's not there in the bank statement. So I add it. How much? 190. So in case there are more than one, I'll show the calculation over here. Okay, this plus this plus this. And there is just one amount which I deposited on 30th June, and it didn't get clear. So I will deduct how much? 130 as uncredited amount. 130. Challenge. Let's do addition and subtraction, and let's see if it now matches. 350 plus 190 minus 130. Ta-da, 410. ठीक है जी. So it matches. So there is a timing difference between the amounts that we have recorded and the bank statement. and those can be explained using the bank reconciliation statement. This is the end of this question. ठीक है जी. So I hope now you'd be able to attempt the odd numbered questions from the ones that I have sent. And if there is any confusion, obviously you can text and ask me.